Welcome back to a new episode of Emerging Brands with Kelly Bennett podcast. Today, I have a special guest. She is someone I've been following on social media. I love her design work. I totally nerd out around her content. Isobel Wynn is here, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited.
You are so welcome. You're the founder of House of Wynn. You're a designer. You live nomadically. I know right before we hit record, you're in London, but every few months you move. And I love your travel content. It's one of my favorites. And I would love to hear the story behind your brand. How did you get here? How did you find this cool lifestyle and business for yourself? Give us all the insight.
Oh my goodness. It's been quite the journey, and it's not been like a super simple one like I feel like a lot of people have in their career paths, partly because, what we do didn't even really exist when I was a child. So,
Totally.
when someone says like, what do you want to do when you're older? Like, I had no idea this was the thing that I could be doing. So never really occurred to me. But, from being a kid, I was always very textbook artsy, I want to say, without being too cliche, like love the painting, the drawing, like art was my ride or die at school. But I never really figured out how I could make a career out of that. So I ended up still going to an arts university and doing that as my degree. And then after that, I ended up in the film industry as a personal assistant. And, this felt like the right career path at the time because I was like, oh, I want to be in film. I want to be a film director. But then I very quickly found myself really hungering after a more creative path, not just getting people's dry cleaning and coffee. Like it worked for a bit, not forever. But I did feel kind of trapped. I was like, I have no idea what I could possibly do. And then COVID hit, and all the film sets around the world just completely shut down. I, to all intents,
Wow.
lost my job, and I had to give up my London flat, and I just moved home with my parents. And I was like, well, if there was ever an out and a time to really try things, now is it. Like everything else in the world is pretty dire. So let's try and make a tiny bit of positivity out of this situation. So I went nuts trying all different kinds of online courses. I tried like pottery, like drawing classes, illustration classes. I did like an online environmental course. I was like, maybe I'll be a scientist, really throwing things into the darkness,
I love this.
Yeah, it was all really strange. And then I came across the term like virtual assistant, and I was like, you know what? I've been a personal assistant in real life. I'll just be a virtual one. And so that's how I started out finding about this online world, was as a virtual assistant.
Oh,
But I then very quickly ended up kind of assisting designers. And I was like, hang on a sec. I could do that too. Like it felt a little bit of imposter syndrome though, because until that point, I'd always been the assistant and never the creative. And it kind of felt like, oh my God, who am I to be the creative in any sense of the word? And it's a very daunting task setting up a business, let alone kind of putting your art out there into the world and your creative mind out there into the world. But I took a load of online courses in graphic design and web design, and I got a job as a delivery girl whilst I was like finding my initial client base. I was like, you know what, got to do what you got to do. I actually loved that job. It was really fun. And yeah, it all went very weirdly well. And I ended up getting like fully booked within 3 months. And then I was at this,
wow.
I know, and it was just very overwhelming, but almost a little bit too like overwhelming. I was like, whoa, we need to slow down here. But I very quickly realized I was like, okay, well, now that I've got some income and COVID has calmed down, what do I do now? Because I didn't really want to go back to London. And I was like, okay, I can work remotely from anywhere. I've kind of got the travel bug. Where can I go? So I just like I moved to a tropical island in like a subtropical island off the coast of Africa called Madeira. And I ended up living there for almost a year. And that's kind of where House of Wynn was really born into what it is today. So like House of Wynn is very much, my safe space for creativity and somewhere where I can experiment and build this kind of vision that allowed me to have this kind of location free lifestyle that allowed me to be free, because I think that's kind of a very core value for me, is feeling free to be who I am and what I want to live. And the fact that I can help others do that through design and help them build their brands was just insane. And the fact that I was doing it from my little beach house like from my little Portuguese island, Madeira, was just the dream. And then since then, it's just kind of grown and grown, and I've like hopped around the world a little bit. And yeah, that's kind of where we are now with House of Wynn.
See, and everyone listening, now you know why I was like, Isobel, would you come on the podcast? Because I had a good feeling just from seeing you on social that this was a cool story, and it totally is a cool story. So tell me this, how did you get those initial clients? Because I'm sure so many people listening, they're like, okay, that sounds amazing. Like you literally are living so many people's like dreams of how they want to live and build a business. So how did you get that initial clientele to help just, build the business so that you can take those next steps?
Yeah, so it was in a few different ways. So a couple of my first ever clients were ones that I had assisted with them being designers, and they ended up kind of like subcontracting me. And I guess it was like a white label situation, which, like is a really great way to cut your teeth into the industry, because you get to see the inside of someone else's business model, get to kind of see
Absolutely.
client relations, which is a whole other bit of business that they never teach you at art school. So it's really handy to like let yourself take those steps and be in the background. But on the side of that, I was slowly building my presence on Instagram. I was posting work, passion projects. I was literally thinking to myself, who is my dream client? And I would just design a brand for them in like a day, the bare minimum, and then make content out of it and post it. And from that, I would get clients and inquiries. And then there was a couple of times where I would literally go online and I'd spend the whole day like just sifting through businesses that I would find, like swimwear brands and just anyone, jewelry brands. And I would just start cold emailing the founders, basically saying, like, I love what you're doing and this is my portfolio, and I'm not trying to sell you anything, but I just want to be on your radar for if you ever need any design work, please reach out and let's chat about it. And I definitely ended up doing a few projects for basically no money, which is kind of unfortunately what sometimes you have to do just to get those initial bits of experience. And
I
that
did
comes,
that too.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I never want to like encourage people to work for free, because I do think that comes from a place of privilege. I had
Mhm.
parent privilege. If I ever really needed to come home, I was able to, and not everyone has that. And
Same.
also kind of privilege in the sense of like, I guess I didn't have a full-time job at that point. I was, working as a part-time delivery girl. But some people have full-time jobs whilst they're building these businesses. So I completely, there's a lot of privilege going on. But yeah, I was able to work for free and very low budgets. And it's slowly snowballed to a place where I felt comfortable with what I was charging. So there's that as well. It's obviously easier to get clients if you're not charging as much, unfortunately. But there comes a time where you have to like obviously know your worth, and you're more likely to get aligned clients when you're charging something that you feel aligned with, if that makes sense.
That absolutely makes sense, and I think that's such a huge hurdle that so many creatives work through. And so for you, what was that shift that you felt that you're like, "Okay, now I feel more comfortable charging what I need to be charging in order to sustainably grow this business, scale the business, take care of myself, save," all those, travel, like, all your goals. What was that maybe shift in your mindset that let you say, okay, it's time. I feel comfortable charging more and I feel comfortable really owning that.
It's definitely is a confidence thing, and a lot of it is mindset and believing that you are worth that. Because I think a lot of people approach design with, selling a list of what you can give them and just saying, well, okay, it only takes X amount of hours. But once you've done enough of these projects, you realize that your creative mind is something to be valued, and not everyone can just come up with these things on the spot. And I started to kind of realize and step into my own power of like, hang on a sec, like not everyone can just create a brand in a week. And you're doing something that is making other people so much more money and so much more value for their lives and their brands. And like I kind of felt, I was like, you know what, I kind of deserve to be compensated as such. I still want my work to be approachable, but I want to be able to live the life that I want to live. And I want people to see value in my work. And money can be like looked at with a lot of shame, unfortunately. But you just have to really be confident in your worth. And it's a really scary thing to approach, because obviously when you raise prices, you'll have certain clientele drop off and you're wondering, am I doing the right thing? And
Right.
it's always going to be scary. You're always going to be kind of wading through the darkness on that sort of thing. But you've got to really trust your gut on when you feel like it's time. I mean, if you want to look at it more from like a very black and white business perspective, it's supply and demand. You know, if you're having a gazillion like inquiries and you find that you don't have the time to take everyone on, it's time to raise your prices and take less people on.
Absolutely. I always tell people that too, especially for service-based businesses. It's always best to raise your prices and adjust your prices is even probably a better way of looking at it so you don't get too anxious about it, is when you're busy. That's the
Mm-hmm.
best time because you can ride that wave of, maybe some people leave, but then you are, waiting to attract new people that align with you and totally respect what you do. So I love that piece of advice. That is such a game changer. What for you did you see that you wanted to do maybe differently in design, or just how you are growing your business? Just also you have an interesting perspective of seeing the behind the scenes of many design businesses. What are some things that you're like, I want to do this my own way, or I wanna see, like, okay, there was a little bit of a gap here, and I wanted to fill that in because I think so many creatives struggle with, like, finding their place in an industry that feels like so many people are doing it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like, it can be very overwhelming when you see just how much competition there is out there. And it really is a case of kind of digging deep into what you think your superpower is. And that's what people will buy into. And it's going to sound really cheesy, but I kind of feel like my superpower is kind of putting humans first. Like, I try and run my business with as much kind of compassion and kindness as possible. And I really pride myself on like getting people. It's always been the case for me where I feel like I can work with someone and just really dig deep into what sets their soul on fire and create a vision that they didn't even realize they needed. Um, and so, it comes, I very much like to look at the client themselves as well as their target audience. A lot of designers just go for the target audience, which is so important. Whereas I believe in marrying the two, because I guess I work with a lot of personal brands, and I just think that if you're not excited about your own brand, then you're not going to be able to represent it with like passion online, which is going to then have an adverse effect anyway. So, if you've got this brand that you think, yeah, sure, like Michelle up the road's going to love it, who might buy it, but I hate it, you're not going to get anywhere. So
I'm so glad that you said that because I feel the same way too. When I'm crafting a brand strategy, I so much focus on the founder and what they see for themselves and what they really want to talk about and what they feel the most confident about, and really helping strategize their brand so that it aligns with what they feel the most empowered talking about and showing up about, because like you said, they're going to be the ones promoting it first. They have to be the most enthusiastic. So I'm really glad that you said that. I think that's a really great point of aligning your brand, if it's a personal brand or a consumer brand, but still rooted in the founder who's hopefully going to be building this brand for many, many years ahead.
100%. I couldn't agree more.
I love that. So, for anyone who's listening who is curious about starting a service based business, maybe a design studio or web design, what piece of advice would you give them?
This is a very good question. I guess the only thing I can really say is what I would have liked to have heard myself, in the sense that, like, don't be so hard on yourself because someone has to make it. So why not you? Like, don't count yourself out just yet. You don't have to know exactly where your life or your brand is going to end up. You just kind of have to head in the general purpose direction of what makes you happy and what you feel holds true to your values and your authenticity. And, messy action is way better than no action.
Yes.
It isn't perfect. Your brand isn't going to be perfect. And I don't know, the world is so full of opportunity and there are things that you don't even realize exist yet, So like, I'm a big believer that we should stop asking children what they want to be when they're older and just start asking, like, what do you want to be first? What do you want to put your energy into first? Because you can be as many things as you want to be. And that's why the personal brand space is just so beautiful and all encompassing. You don't have to be just one thing, you know. Hope that makes sense.
I love that so much, and that resonates with me so much. I always call it like relaunching. I've relaunched myself as a personal brand so many times of just finding my way, and my path is anything but linear. So I really appreciate you saying that. Also, I really needed to hear that too. So thank you. I really appreciate it. And I know so many people listening are being like, okay, that feels so much better. So anyone listening who is needing design work or is getting their brand ready to get great, beautiful design, how does someone reach out to you? How do they work with you? Maybe what types of brands do you work with? I know you mentioned personal brands.
Yeah, so I work with a lot of personal brands, and it's now starting to like reach out into a whole bunch of people I never in my dizziest daydreams thought I'd work with. You know, we're talking like jewelry brands and beverage brands and like cafes and tour guides that live in Marseille. It's been like a real range. And, you know, the best way to get hold of me is probably, you know, through my website form, or you can drop me a DM if it's just a question. I'm always up for like hearing people's creative visions and their dreams and seeing if there's a way that I can like help them get there and plug myself into kind of like making that happen. But yeah,
And what is your website and social handle?
so my Instagram is at House of Wynn, and the Wynn is spelled Wynn. And my website is www.houseofwynn.co.
Love it. And I'll put all the links in the show notes and on my blog with kellybennett.com. And I just want to thank you again for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. Truly, truly appreciate it. And this was such a beautiful reminder of doing things your own way and going for it and taking maybe the road less traveled, but it's going to get you to where you want to be and places you hadn't even dreamed up yet. And I just really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much
You're
for having
so
me
welcome.
on.
My pleasure. Talk to you soon, and I'll see everyone on the next episode.